I'm Kristen from Hammock Haven Farm, and I'm back on 2 feet. I'm still limping, but at least I can get out here and fit my boot on. Today, we are going to talk about something I've been thinking about a lot while I've been sitting on the sofa, and that is terroir. Sounds like a scary word. Basically, it means from the earth, and I'm thinking about how I can use our natural cultures and some of the natural things in our raw milk to make a better cheese. So we're going to talk a bit about that today, and then we also had a request from a viewer to talk about cheese presses. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and see if we can't find any online. I know the one that I've got isn't being sold anymore, which is really a bummer. I love the thing. Let's go back inside. One of the advantages of using raw milk in your cheese is that you actually have the microorganisms that are in your milk and vary a little bit from region to region and from basically what you're feeding them and all of that, and it gives your cheese a slightly different flavor than one that was made up the road or made in another state or made it in another country. Since we have our own dairy farm, it gives me a lot more flexibility to use the milk at different stages and do different things and take advantage of those natural microbes. So I've been doing a bunch of research on people who have their own farms and are making raw milk cheese, and finding that they're really working on developing their own natural cultures instead of using a starter culture on their milk, using their own from the land. I'm not quite ready to dive in with both feet on that, so I kind of want to show you what I did. This is a Colby that I made about a year ago, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with this cheese. It is just creamy and delicious, and I like everything about it. I wanted to see if I could kick it up a notch. This was made only using mesophilic, the MM100 culture, and it was probably made using milk that was a couple of days old, because usually I would compile it and then pull the older milk out of the refrigerator. So what I wanted to do with this to get as many of our own natural cultures as possible is to use the warm milk straight out of the goats. So I kind of did a two-step thing with this. First, yesterday, I took this much warm milk, and I'm still a little nervous about just leaving it up there to clabber. So I added a tiny, tiny bit of buttermilk culture. Just a pinch. And then I left it overnight, and you see it's just thickened beautifully and it smells delicious. So when I went to do the cheese today, instead of adding the MM culture, well, the whole amount of MM culture, I put in a half a cup of this for my 8-gallon batch of cheese to use the starter. But then I got scared that, hey, that might not be enough and might not set it up. And so I did put in a tiny bit, about 1/8 of a teaspoon of the MM100 culture as well. And so let's go take a look at how those curds ended up. These are the Colby curds I made today using the new culture method I'm trying. They look really good, and I took a nibble on one of them, and it's got a lot of flavor in there for just fresh raw curds. I'm gonna get these salted in the press. This was my first cheese press. It's a sad little thing. I got it on eBay. Nothing wrong with the people who made it. It was a good idea, but it doesn't really work. It does to a point, but I'm going to explain why I really recommend a lever style or Dutch style press. When I first got this one, it came with just like a PVC mold, and it would fit under here, and then there was a spring, which I've long since lost, and you would put your cheese in, put your follower in, and then screw these down, and then you'd have your spring putting tension on the cheese. And the problem with this whole plan is that as the curd compresses, it sinks down, and that spring is no longer putting constant pressure on the cheese. And so unless I felt like getting up at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning to make sure that my cheese was still pressing, I'd get up in the morning and find that the spring was loose and it hadn't had any pressure on it for half the night. And it just doesn't make a good cheese. Now I've seen some that are similar to this, where instead of having this middle part with a spring deal, they just have the bar that goes across, and then you actually put the weights down on the bar. And that could work okay, except you've got no lever system to maximize your weight. So, I mean, if something's calling for 50 pounds of pressure, how are you going to stack 50 pounds on top of that? It's just not going to work. Now, this is something very DIY, and if you don't want to invest in a press right now, I've actually done this and had it work. Usually I'd want to put it in a cookie sheet or some kind of a tray to keep the whey from dripping all off of your counter onto your floor. And put a cutting board, your cheese mold, and if this were full of cheese, the follower would be up like this, okay? And then you put another cutting board on top, and then you can pile your weights on top of here. Now, some of the problems with this is if you don't have this perfectly balanced on top of your cheese, that curd is going to start to compress more on one side than on another, and everything might just fall off. So to fix that at some point, I had taken twine and tied around both sides of the cutting board to tie it down, and then tie the weights on top of it. And it's just an awful lot of work, but it does work. And now finally, this is what I recommend if you could find something like it. This one is from Cheesemaking.com, and it's a double Dutch style press. They do have one that's a single Dutch style press on their website, but I'm not sure how big it is here, how big of a mold you can fit in. You can see with this one that this is the large cheese mold, and it doesn't have a whole lot of wiggle room on either side with this even bigger press. The things I really like about the Dutch style press is having the simple machine of the lever gives you some extra weight on the actual cheese, so I'm not having to hang 50 pounds up over here to get the weight on the cheese. The other thing I like is as the cheese compresses down, and you can see how far this is compressed since I put this one in here. These curds were full to the top, but now they're about here. It continues to press down with and keep constant pressure on your curd. So when I set this up, if you were just to leave this on the counter, same thing with the cutting board method, the whey would just go all over on the counter. So I use a giant cookie sheet, giant tray underneath mine, and then since it is wood, I don't like it just to be sitting in whey all the time. It will start to open the grain on the wood. This one is oak, but it still will open the grain. And I do oil this from time to time just to keep it in good shape. And so what I end up doing is I take some heavy-duty aluminum foil, put it underneath my cheese mold, and then make a little funnel into a little dish to collect the whey here. And it helps to keep everything tidy and helps to keep my cheese press dry. Just for anybody who's interested in any measurements, this particular press, although like I said, I don't think it's available anymore, but maybe we could yell at them and see if they could get it, is let's see, about 8 and almost 9 inches. I'd say 8 and 7/8 inches across. So you'll have no trouble fitting, I think this is an 8-inch mold in there. The arm itself here, it adjusts so you can fit pretty much any height. You can actually stack a couple of molds in here, and you probably do 4 cheeses at a time if you did 2 and 2. And then the lever arm here is from the point where you hang these, is about 8.5 inches on your lever arm. So I don't know if that helps everybody, but I do wish they still sold these. Well, that's all I've got for now. If you have any more questions about presses, please leave them down below and I will get back to you on that. And I'll also continue to keep you updated on how my little raw milk terroir experience is coming along. So far, so good. Have a good day. Thanks for watching.